Hello, everyone. My name is Kim Crayton. I am the founder of the hashtag Cause a Scene community podcast, as well as the Anti-Racist Economist. And today I will be talking to you about profit without oppression. Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Kim Crayton, and I want to start with this slide because as a person who's finishing up my doctorates of business administration, focusing on technology entrepreneurship, my area of expertise is how to effectively share organizational knowledge for competitive advantage, differentiation, and innovation. And also the school that I'm attending, one of their founding tenets is social change. So working to better foster social change through research practice and the education of motivated scholar practitioners. I am a scholar practitioner. I take research and theory and I test it and practice it in the real world. We are no longer creating widgets. Business leaders must learn to operate in an information economy, but information alone has no inherent value. It's only information that is developed into knowledge that has value. And that's the difference between explicit knowledge, which someone can find in a binder, your hiring practices, or your onboarding information, and tacit knowledge, which is that information that I have learned on my job, to how to do my job more effectively and efficiently, and to be able to scale that, share that with an organization so you can scale it. To that end, my goal is to democratize business school education so that business leaders anywhere, particularly from marginalized and vulnerable communities, can develop the skills and knowledge they need to build successful businesses. At the intersection of theory and application lies knowledge, creativity, innovation, and the opportunity to redefine our global capitalist system without white supremacy. So let's define terms. I'm an educator and I always start with terms because I would like, so everybody's on the same page. Privilege. People get so triggered by this word privilege, and privilege is simply about access. I don't know how many of you seen National Geographic shows or nature shows about these monkeys that are in these warm springs in Japan during the winter. What it seems like when they present it on shows, it's like this harmonious thing. Oh my God, look how great this is. But that's not really what's going on here. What's going on here, and you can see there's a matriarchal family that gets to stay in the hot springs, and the other monkeys that are around are doing everything they can to ingratiate themselves to the people who have the privilege to have access to these warm springs. Underrepresented is simply about numbers. In this photo, you have several men and one woman. The woman is underrepresented. Marginalized is about treatment, and that is about groups of people. It's not about the individual. Diversity is simply about variety. So I often use this example. If you have a box of crayons, you give me a box of crayons and there are only 4 crayons in it, it's going to be a very ugly picture. I can't get too creative with it. It's going to be very ugly because I don't consider myself an artist. It's going to be a very ugly picture. But if you give me a box of 64 crayons, it still may be a very ugly picture, but it's going to be a colorful picture. There's some things that I can do. I can mix colors together, create my own colors. There's some things I can do with the 64 box crayons that unless I'm an expert in art, I can't really make 4 crayons work for me. And inclusion is simply about experience. You don't get to say someone is included or feels included in your organization or your community or your event. They, based on their lived experience with you and your initiatives, will tell you or tell themselves if they feel included or not. So inclusion is not about equality. It is not about 1 + 1 = 2. It is not about I gave Harry 5 cookies and I gave Sarah 5 cookies, so they're equal. No, that's not how it is, because what we see in the real world, you may have given Harry 5 cookies, but you shit on Sarah's cookies before you gave it to her. So that's not equality. She's not going to eat those cookies. Inclusion is also not about quotas. It's not about, oh, we need so many women. We need so many people from the LGBTQ community. We need so many people of color. We need so many indigenous individuals. We need so many Black people. It is not about quotas. Inclusion is about equity. It is about, if I gave, let's say Sarah, again, Sarah $100 to buy groceries, and I gave Maggie $100 to buy groceries, but Sarah lives in a community where the grocery stores near her have fresh fruit. There's farmers markets near her. There's actually farms around her. The quality of food that Sarah gets is better than Maggie. If Maggie's community is a food desert, she doesn't have a car to get anywhere. She has to take an Uber or Lyft or a bus. That is not equality. That's what people would consider equality. I'm looking for equity. We need to make sure that Maggie's experience with food is on par with Sarah's experience with food. So that means, although Sarah doesn't need these other things, we would make sure that Maggie has access to get to whatever food thing. So we would add more money or ensure that, give her an account with an Uber or Lyft or a bus card or something. We would make sure that the quality of food in her community, if the quality of food in her community is not equal to Sarah's, we will make sure that she can get to a place and get back home comfortably from getting that same quality of food. That is what equity is. It is saying, what do we need to do so these experiences that these two individuals have are more equitable? So again, I said inclusion is about experience. So let's talk about racism. Racism is race prejudice plus social and institutional power. Racism is a system of advantage based on race. Racism is a system of oppression based on race. Racism is a white supremacist system. Racism is different from racial prejudice, hatred, and discrimination. Racism involves one group having the power to carry out systematic discrimination through the institutional policies and practices of the society, and by shaping the cultural beliefs and values that support those racist policies and practices. And this is why there's a distinction between underrepresented, which are individuals, and marginalized, which are groups. So white women in tech are underrepresented. They are also not, unless they have an intersection of another marginalization, they are not marginalized in tech. White women benefit from white supremacy. We also have to talk about anti-Blackness, because anti-Blackness has been the most successful strategy of global import of white supremacy. So the Council of Democratizing Education defines anti-Blackness as being a two-part formation that both voids Blackness of value while systematically marginalizing Black people and their issues. So the first form of anti-Blackness is overt. Beneath this anti-Black racism is the covert, structural, and systemic racism, which categorically predetermines the system, socioeconomic status of Black people in the United States. And I added globally because anti-Blackness is global. The structure is held in place by anti-Black policies, institutions, and ideologies. And what you're seeing happening right now, particularly in the United States, and has grown globally with Black Lives Matter movement, is talking about this overt system, institutional, and policies that are designed for anti-Blackness. The second form of anti-Blackness is this unethical disregard of anti-Black institutions and policies. This disregard is the product of class, race, and or gender privilege, certain individuals' experiences due to anti-Black institutions and policies. This form of anti-Blackness is protected by the first form of form of overt racism. So we see this with Black women are angry. When I am a manager and my subordinate is a white person, how long it takes me as a Black person to craft an email so that your feelings don't get hurt. Because once white people's feelings get hurt, then we're not talking about what was content in the email. Now we have to talk about your feelings. White people need to learn how to manage their feelings. These are the things that happen. These are the things that Black anti-Blackness. This is how anti-Blackness shows up in our own organizations. So we're going to get to the business part of this. So products and services are not businesses. And I have to say this over and over again, because the majority of organizations out there, I would not call businesses. And this is in particularly in the tech space. They are products and services that people have been able to scale because they had customers, but they have no procedures, policies, or processes in place to scale anything. So every time you hire somebody new, it's a different experience. Every time there's an evaluation, there's a different experience. Or you're using the evaluation, and every manager who's using the evaluation is using a different metric or has a different interpretation or understanding of how that metric is. That is not a business. That is an organization. So product or service alone is not a business, and you cannot measure manage what you cannot measure. And for me, this speaks to my heart. Many marginalized entrepreneurs overwhelmingly create jobs for themselves rather than businesses. You see this with, as someone who is an accountant. You see this with someone who's a house cleaner. You see this with someone who's a handyman. They're creating jobs for themselves rather than a business. All too often, organizations fail, cannot scale, and/or become toxic because their leaders don't understand that growth requires processes that enable connectedness, innovation, and competitive advantage. Successful organizations are built on a foundation that enables leaders to turn information into knowledge in order to scale, evolve, and recover. And this goes back to when I was saying the difference between explicit knowledge, which is something that you can put in a binder and share. And that worked when we were creating widgets, because when someone got on the assembly line, their widget needs to look like everybody else's because that widget fit in 1,000 different things. We're not creating that anymore. And we're not in manufacturing industrial economy. We are a knowledge economy. So you need to be able to get out of my head what I've learned about your business so that you can use that for competitive advantage. And that's tacit knowledge. The ability of organizational leaders to successfully create and manage operations relies heavily on how well they are at developing these necessary processes. Again, this is the difference between having an organization and having a business. When leaders take the time to understand and operationalize their organization's functions, they avoid common barriers to success while being able to recover more quickly for unexpected events. I'd say all the time, right now, most companies don't think about risk management enough, but increasingly, they're having to deal with crisis management. So risk management is a proactive process. Crisis management is a reactive process. And increasingly, we're seeing people having to deal with crisis management issues, particularly when it comes to employees who are on their off-time behavior, whose off-time behavior is impacting their organizations, or whose partners or organizational partners' behavior is impacting your business. Building a successful organization with fewer unintended consequences requires more than just a great product and service. It requires leaders being able to give all stakeholders the experiences they want and the ability to manage the processes. So when I want to talk about stakeholders, so in traditional business, we talk about shareholder value only. And that means that our only priority is to make sure, ensure that whoever invests in us are getting a money back, or they are successful at their investments. Because by law, if a business has an opportunity to make more money for shareholders and they opt out, and then shareholders can actually sue the CEO and the board of directors. And this is where people have a problem with understanding fundamentally, to me, what capitalism is and how capitalism works. And so It is a lot of the things that we want to do as a society to improve businesses by law, by how these organizations are structured, we can't do it that way. So a stakeholder is all those people who work with you, all those people who partner with you, all those people who buy from you, and all those people who invest in you. And then those go in the hierarchy. You have to make sure that the people who work with you are taken care of first, work for you are taken care of first, and then you extend that circle of influence out to those people who partner with you, because as I said before, we don't want to have partners whose behavior negatively impacts our business, our reputation. And then you focus on the people who buy from you, because once you have the people who work for you and the people who partner with you in alignment, then the people who buy from you get that experience. And once that happens, the people who invest with you will get the best investment that they can. Going from a product or service focused to business focused model takes time, intention, strategic effort. All are necessary in order to innovate, differentiate, and compete in the information age. And this is where I have an issue with the Facebook ethos, which has permeated tech, the move fast, break things, move fast, break things. I don't fundamentally have a problem with moving fast, breaking things. What I have a problem is the fact that most of us in tech move fast, break things, move fast, break things, move fast, break things. And we never stop to figure out what we broke, how we broke it, who was harmed, and how we can fix that and minimize harm in the future. Those are the components that are missing. Also, building stakeholder value rather than shareholder value focused organizations is a proactive approach to addressing inclusion, diversity, safe spaces, and developing a harm reduction perspective. This is why I say I am not an inclusion and diversity specialist. It's only because inclusion and diversity should be the bedrock of every organization that is focused on being successful in the information economy. It's the fact that most organizations, the majority organizations, don't have that have to spend so much time addressing inclusion and diversity in these organizations before I can even go into and start building out the process, procedures, and policies they need to move to a business structure. When leaders create organizations around well-defined and tested core values that consider the needs of all stakeholders and have processes in place to monitor progress, they are less likely to discover at some point in the future that they've been nurturing an exclusionary environment with unintended consequences. So the process for shifting to product to service focus to a business focused business. Step one, imagine. Imagine the ideal stakeholder experience and write that down in detail. And you want to use as many adjectives as you can. And it's not a judgment call. You're just writing this stuff out. You just want to get it out of your head and think about what that ideal stakeholder experience would be. And you want to define that. You want to define your core values and, equally important, the indicators of success that would let you understand or see, forget understanding, demonstrate that your core values, that the imagine part, the details are being implemented or designed into your organization. Then you want to apply. You want to apply measurement to these indicators, because as I said, you cannot manage what you cannot measure. And you want to test the indicators with stakeholders. And this is the move fast, break things. Hey, let's stop. We broke something. What did we break? How do we break it? Did we hurt anybody? How do we make amends? What do we do next? That's the thing. That's the step that you need to take. So it's not just testing and getting this data. This data should inform your choices moving forward. Then you want to evaluate that measurement to determine if your benchmarks were met. And then once you've done that a few times, iterated that process a few times, then you want to standardize these things, because the more you have a process for, the more you can easily communicate to individuals inside and outside of your organization. The more you can do that, the more you have headspace. So if you have a standardized hiring process that you've discovered, you've created, that ensures that so let me back up for a second, because I wanted to say, when I talk about inclusion and diversity, diversity is about recruitment. So that's that variety part. Inclusion is about retention, and that's that experience part, or whether people are going to stay in your organization. So let's say you have developed the processes that ensure that you have a very diverse workforce, right? And you want to standardize that if it proves that also improves retention, which is inclusion. You want to standardize that so that everyone who's hiring, everyone who's managing is saying and doing the same things, so that you can, once you do that, you have the bandwidth, you have the mental capacity as an organization to deal with now the risk management and crisis management issues that may come up, because they do. And this is why I say we talk about reduction of harm and minimizing harm. We will never eliminate harm because there are too many outliers, there are too many variables. So some important considerations. Core values should inform all organizational decisions. Remember that this is an ongoing process. It is an iterative process. It's a living process. It's not like you do something, put it down, and that you never come back to it. The decisions that are the result of these processes should be seen as immutable and should not be seen as immutable or rigid. This is fluid. Organizational leaders should plan to review whether stakeholder factors have changed at least twice a year. This will enable them to proactively anticipate shifts and plan shifting needs and plan accordingly. So this review should be a process, and it helps you create and vet the other processes that you have. So now I want to talk about the thing that really gets my heart excited, and it's capitalism, because I often see on social media and just conversations, people like, oh, capitalism is evil. We got here because capitalism is evil. And that is not true. Capitalism is a theory. It was an idea. It was how we have implemented capitalism globally that is problematic. We globally have implemented capitalism rooted in white supremacy. We have implemented capitalism that is dependent on harm reduction, that is dependent on exploitation, that is dependent on theft. In the United States, capitalism was built on the annihilation of indigenous people and the enslavement of Africans. But that is not what how Adam Smith, who people consider the grandfather or the father of economics, saw capitalism. He wrote 2 books. One is The Moral Sentiment. He was thinking about morals. And then he wrote in 1776, and that year should seem very familiar to you because that was when the U.S. got its, some U.S. white males got their independence in the United States. And in 1776, he wrote Wealth of Nations. So Adam Smith was thinking about economics and morals. He was actually an abolitionist. So the founding fathers of the United States intentionally decided that to abstract the moral part of Adam Smith capitalist ideas out of, because they were in direct contrary to having slaves. Adam Smith was an abolitionist. He did not approve of chattel slavery. So let's talk about profit. I don't see anything wrong with profit. If you look at that definition of, let's go back. If you look at that definition of capitalism, it's just economics and political systems of which a country's trade and industry are controlled by private owners for profit rather than the state. So let's define profit. A financial gain, especially the difference between the amount earned and the amount spent in buying, operating, and producing something. That's what simply profit is. This is what oppression is, and this is what capitalism as a global economic system is built on. It is built on profit with oppression, prolonged, cruel, or unjust treatment or control. I want people to start thinking through the lens of profit without oppression. So this helps me have a conversation with an individual. I don't need to know your morals. I don't need to know your values. I don't need to know your religious beliefs. I don't need to know any of your ideologies. It is simply me asking, do you believe that, or would you like to build an organization, build a business that can be profitable, that is profitable without relying on the oppression and exploitation and the theft of other people? Instead of mixing capitalism with social justice, and it's like we're doing this. Capitalism is rooted in white supremacy, and yet we're trying to wrap social justice on top of that. They are not congruent. What about shifting the lens to capitalism as social justice? Capitalism without oppression as social justice. Democratizing business school education is a social justice and anti-racist movement. Let's move from elite campuses where only the most privileged and powerful learn how to build build businesses, to have this information, this knowledge, and share it with each other. Let's move that to Main Street, where your average individual who would like to build a scalable business can have this information. It also, when we're talking about the wealth gap, nothing improves the circumstances of the most marginalized and vulnerable when it comes to the wealth gap than building businesses that are able to scale so that they can pass something on to generationally. Let's turn business research into action. It shouldn't be just in these books. It shouldn't be, business research shouldn't just be the domain of academics or economists and these highbrow, conversations. It should be everybody on Main Street should be able to have a conversation about how business research should inform their decisions on building and growing their businesses. And it also establishes harm reduction as an organizational imperative. So how do I get to this place? I just want to give you a little bit before I wrap up. Hashtag Cause a Scene has 4 guiding principles, and they are in the order of importance as they the most important is the last one, but you can't get to the last one without understanding, internalizing these. So let me walk you through these. Tech is not neutral. We need to understand that every technology is biased. It was created by a human being, and human beings are biased. And this is where we mess up in tech, when we only value quantitative evidence, quantitative research. Qualitative research is about lived experience. It's about, and you need both, and which is considered mixed method. You need to understand the data, but you also need to understand how you got to the data. What was the lived experience of the people or the situations that got you the data? And that should be informing your decisions. Also, intention without strategy is chaos. This is one of the biggest obstacles that I see in organizations who want to be anti-racist, who want to have to be more inclusive and improve diversity. They have an intention, but they don't have a strategy, which causes chaos. Lack of inclusion is a risk management issue, and I'm more often saying it's also increasingly a crisis management issue based on the things that I've said before. When you have a lack of inclusion, there are so many blind spots, so many things that you don't understand. You don't even know what you don't even know, and we're creating products and services that cause harm. And the most important thing we need to do, which gets us to profit without oppression, is we need to prioritize the most vulnerable. Their voices should be lifted up and amplified, because the most vulnerable are the ones with the lived experience we need to create the products and services that are that work and create success in the knowledge economy. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.